quite some time ago, and I'm really trying not to say it because it's a knee-jerk reaction. So he might be doing something. I'd be like, dude, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing that? And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh my God, like what if, like that just rolls off my tongue like it's nothing. But for him, for a 9-year-old to be like, what's wrong with you? Like, I kind of step back from that and be like, wait a second. No. I cannot speak to him like that. So what I mean? So like praise, discipline, but I would also say a balancing conversations around negative self-talk.
What we know in terms of discipline is that there's a difference between punishment and effective discipline. So punishment tends to be arbitrary, like, I'm taking your cell phone away for a month, and it's not tied to anything. It's just sort of an anger response to a behavior that you don't like. It doesn't tend to do much learning.
There's a voice inside your kid's head, and if you're honest, there's one in ours too. And that one says, am I good enough? Am I too much? Have I ever been enough? Like these types of questions, like they don't just rattle around in our kids' brains, but they also rattle around in our brain and everybody else's brain that you might know. This is a real human question that we ask ourselves, and it's so deep that it really impacts every single relationship and how we even show up in life. So gentlemen, what's going on? My name is Larry Hagner. I am the father of 4 wild boys. I am the husband of 1 amazing woman. I am the host of this podcast. I'm also the founder of the Dad Edge Alliance, which is our elite brotherhood for career-driven men, and the Dad Edge Boardroom. This is our elite brotherhood for entrepreneurial dads that want to grow their business that they love without sacrificing the people that they love, so their wives and their kids as well. And today's conversation, it's all about that voice behind the voice. It's the inner critic that forms in the childhood. It either destroys the confidence or it shapes it. Today, I've got Dr. Blaise Aguirre. He is a Harvard psychiatrist and a global expert on adolescent mental health. He has spent over 25 years helping teens and families face anxiety, self-hatred, emotional chaos. But in this episode, he's not talking to kids. He is talking to me and you, the dads, the leaders, the husbands. And here's what we dig into today: how your tone becomes your child's inner voice. And man, I've heard this one before. It's like the tone in our voice actually becomes their inner voice. And man, that is so true. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting here trying to like think about all the things that I'm trying to like undo myself. Also, what is wrong with you is one of the most damaging phrases that we can possibly say to our kids. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? What's wrong with you? How to raise critical thinkers that aren't catastrophizing thinkers. So people that can think critically instead of going to the worst case scenario all the time. And how your emotional regulation becomes your child's emotional foundation. This podcast today, man, it hits hard, it hits deep, but you know what? Let's just dive right in because that's what we do.
All right, Dr. Blaise, what's going on? Good to see you, man. Good to see you here.
Good to see you. I'm out in Boston, and the weather's finally getting a little bit warmer. I prefer the cold weather a bit, so just getting reclimatized. And thank you for having me on your show, Larry.
So you like the cold, huh?
I do. I think it's such a healing force. The humans evolved to be able to tolerate a lot of stuff, including the cold, and I just find it so grounding. It's truth serum to me. It says like, here I am. So, but I tend to think out of the box in that way. So,
oh dang, man. So I'll admit I hate the cold. Like, I can't wait to actually move. I'm in the Midwest where we get a little bit of everything, but yeah, put me more south, man. The more south I go, the happier I get.
We're in the Midwest.
I live in St. Louis, so
Oh wow.
Yeah. If the country had a heartbeat, we'd probably be right around.
Right in the middle. Well, I went to Notre Dame, and my best friend lives in St. Louis, so I love St. Louis.
Awesome, man. And so you actually teach out at Harvard, right? Did you go there, by the way?
No, I studied medicine in South Africa, in Johannesburg, at the University of the Witwatersrand, which is a big medical school. And then I came to the States in 19, I trained in psychiatry at Boston University. I joined the Harvard faculty in 2000, so this is my 25th year.
Wow. What's it like working for Harvard for 25 years? Just tell me about that. Give us a glimpse of like what is it like to work in Harvard?
Look, on the one hand, I just love smart people, and so that I find a lot of really smart people that I like to talk to. I mean, I think that one of the things that sometimes happens is that when you are in a position of academia, you can get stuck in ways of thinking that doesn't allow for critical thinking. So I think, the downside is when intelligent people lose their critical thinking. So there's a tremendous upside. It's absolutely wonderful. And at the same time, I also find that even smart people need to be shaken up every now and then. So it's a little bit of both, But mostly I like it. Mostly I like it because I can do my thing.
What have you found that you like best about working at Harvard? Is it just the fact that you're surrounded by other people with intellect and you can have deeper conversations with, or what is it?
I mean, I think that has a large part to do with it. I mean, a lot of the work that I've done has been because I've been in an environment that's allowed me to test my thinking. So, for instance, when I was in training, if a kid was suicidal, they would be locked up, put in, maybe a padded room, maybe put in restraints. And, we had the idea that using new technologies that you didn't have to do that to a kid. And being in an environment that allowed for a freedom to test new ideas in terms of a child's mental health. So that part of it, I really enjoyed. But there was also kind of intellectual arrogance at times, which was somewhat off-putting. But at the end of the day, I mean, that if I get caught up in what other people are thinking, like what other people are thinking about me is none of my business, to be honest with you. I've just got to get on with what I need to do, because at the end of the day, I've got to answer to something that's much bigger than I am, as to, what I've done with my life, so I don't tend to respond too well to following the party line. But I've also been privileged or lucky that I haven't had to, so yeah.
And I know that you study a variety of different things, but one of the things that you study that I thought was really, really fascinating on a whole lot of levels is like how we develop maybe this inner critic voice that we have, like as a kid. You even identify it as self-hatred as a child. It's interesting that you're talking about this, because I met with one of my one-on-one clients yesterday. I'm sorry, not yesterday, Friday. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about like, the way I speak to myself, I wouldn't speak this way to my best friend. Mm-hmm. But why do I speak to myself this way? And I'm like, mm-hmm. What are you talking about? He's like, man, I can put myself down so badly and speak to myself so poorly that if I really just sort of witness it happening, it's really cruel. And I was like, there's a lot of truth to that. I was like, man, I really get that. And I was like, I can't tell you how many times I have had a conversation with myself that I wouldn't even say out loud to somebody. So I'm curious, where does all that even come from? Like, where's the origin of that voice?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I do a type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy, which says that, different people's perspectives, even if they're very, very different from each other, can be true at the same time. So, somebody might religiously be one religion, another person might be another religion. And even though the religions may not necessarily get along, that they're each true for who the person is. Okay. So the reason I'm saying that is that having an inner critical voice is not necessarily all that bad. So, for instance, let's just say that you do a podcast and, maybe it didn't go the way that you wanted it to. Maybe you wish you'd asked other questions. It's okay to say, you know what, next time I'm going to take certain notes. I'm going to remember to ask this question. I'm going to remember to make these changes. So, I'm going to remember to, or maybe you're a parent, or maybe you're studying something, and you say, look, next time I'm going to push myself a little bit harder. That's okay. It's okay to have a small inner critical voice. The kind of inner critical voice that I'm talking about is one that says, because I didn't have a good podcast, I'm a terrible human being. It's one that then moves away from, I can change this about the next time I do a podcast, to, as a human, I am flawed. And because I am flawed, this is why bad things happen to me. So that unchecked inner critical voice is the thing that concerns me most, because it can take over your whole brain. It can take over your whole experience. Now, there's a difference between that inner critical voice that develops as an adult, where, maybe, I don't know, maybe you didn't do as well as you would have liked with a client, or as a parent, or in your professional life, personal life, whatever it is. And you can sort of contextualize that and say, yeah, typically speaking, I do pretty well with my clients, but, I screwed up on Friday, whatever it is. To a child whose environment as a 4, 5, 6-year-old is, maybe it's kindergarten but living at home, and where that voice begins to set in, that you are a broken child, that you're a flawed kid, they aren't able to step out of themselves, and sort of see life as anything other than that experience. I mean, if you think about, like, I don't know, like a frog lays eggs in a pond, and the little tadpoles grow up, and all it knows is water. Well, that's all it's ever going to know. But then one day it develops, I don't know, legs, and jumps out of the water and says, wow, there's another reality out here. And so it's the same sort of thing, that the child is believing this thing about themselves, but it isn't able to contextualize it. And it just internalizes that it's not like the things that they have done are flawed, is that they are flawed. And they just start to believe it.
Do we talk very openly about that? Like, as a kid, like, are there signs that, like, my kid is starting to have this conversation with his or herself?
Yeah.
But it might be deeper than that. You know what I mean? Like, are there breadcrumbs?
Yeah, there definitely there are. And I think the breadcrumbs are, so one of the breadcrumbs is highly sensitive kids. So I have 4 kids of my own. 2 of them are very sensitive, and 2 of them not so much. The sensitive ones tend to react more to emotional situations than the non-sensitive ones. Like they're playing soccer, they fall down, I say, get up. And one of them, 2 of them will get up, and the others will be like, okay, like, oh, that was really hard, or something like that. They're going to have a different response, even though I'm the same parent, to the same interaction. So one of them is if you've got a very sensitive kid. But then they start saying things like, I'm so stupid, nobody likes me, I get, maybe they're getting bullied at school, and those kinds of things. And, as a parent, one thing is to, like, hey, stand up to the bullies. Well, some children might be able to, and others might not be able to. But if you say, go stand up to the bullies, but they're not able to, they will then internalize that as further evidence that they are a flawed child, because they're not able to do the thing that you're asking them to do. And so any kind of self-critical statement that a child makes can be an indication that they're heading to deep self-dissatisfaction, even to the point of self-hatred.
How do we help them unravel that?
Yeah. So I think that, one of the things that parents tend to do is that when your child says something really critical about themselves, we tend to tell them that it's not true. And, like, oh, nobody loves me. You say, well, that's not true. I mean, I love you, those kinds of things. And it's a very understandable parental response. And for some kids, that's all they need. But if you truly, truly believed that no one loved you, simply telling someone that it's not true doesn't make it true. So if you have a belief about who you are as a human being, and you're very convicted about that belief, whatever it is, and I tell you, Larry, that's just not true. It doesn't matter how many times I tell you that it's not true. If you believe it to be true, you're going to say it's true. You're going to say, I'm a dad. And I say, well, that's not true. And say, what are you talking about? It is true. I know that it's true. So, so rather than challenging that as not true, like imagine a kid says, nobody likes me at school. I mean, I suppose it's possible that nobody likes the kid at school, but let's just say that that's just not true. It's just that they had a fight with their best friend. Sitting there, giving them a hug and saying, what happened? Rather than telling them that it's just not true, to go upstairs and do their homework. So it's what happened? What happened? I'm so stupid. What happened? So if you can actually like get them to start processing in their own mind how they got to that conclusion, you're doing two things. One, you're being the parent who listens to your child, number one. And number two, you're showing them a process of critical thinking that gets them to be able to solve future problems by this kind of critical thinking.
So just by helping them process this helps them.
Yeah.
I can understand, like, from a parenting perspective, why we want to like just rush in and try to like take away the pain or the self-doubt or anything like that. But instead, what you really need to do is guide them to process through it. Correct?
I think so, because what you want in the long run, I mean, in the short run, you might say, come on, like you've got dinner on the table and you've got, stuff that you need to do, and you might want to rush it through. But by that process, you're always going to be the parent that listened. And, later on in life, when problems become even bigger, your child will always come to you. But you're also teaching them how to critically think about how they get to conclusions.
So once they start to process through something, like when you say, tell me what happened. Mm-hmm. And let's just say the kid's like, maybe he or she was picked on at school, or maybe they got a bad grade on the test or whatever it is. And let's just take that for an example. Okay. I got an F on this test. I'm dumb. Like, I'll never amount to anything. I mean, that's extreme, but like,
that's what I see. That's exactly what I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like, maybe they take that, they start running with it. Like, and then let's just say, like, tell me what happened. Mm-hmm. And judging by the age of the kid, I mean, they could like really start to run in a direction of extremes, right? Like, I know it's so tempting for us as parents to be like, oh, wait, it's not that bad. Hang on.
Yeah, right.
But is that not the thing to do?
All right, guys. Quick pause. Those were screeching tires if you didn't catch it. It was really, really bad. This next part of the conversation is all about your kid's inner voice. But what about the voices they are hearing from their screens? What about those voices? So let's be honest. Phones, group chats, TikTok, YouTube, they're shaping our kids more than what we realize. And most of it, it's not really helping their confidence, their emotional regulation, or their self-worth. That's why for the past 6 years, I have trusted Bark, and now it's more than just an app. Bark has now built the Bark phone, which comes completely preloaded with all the safety controls, the text, the apps, the web access. You manage it all without needing to be a tech genius. Side note, my 11-year-old started with the Bark watch. He doesn't like things on his wrist. He's just one of those kids. He's more of the kids more has a sensory type of an issue when it comes to certain things. And so he just wouldn't wear it. He's like, I don't like this on my wrist, and he wouldn't wear it. He's never worn a watch. So we got him a Bark phone. Well, I can tell you the Bark phone is awesome. We've had it now for 2 months, and it comes preloaded with everything that I just talked about. It is like the easy button when it comes to this. My 9-year-old, So for younger kids, the Bark Watch is clutch. Like I was saying, there's no browser, there's no social media. It's just GPS texting and calling the people that you approve. But here's the best part. Bark has always and always will give the Dad Edge listeners 10% off any product or plan for life. Just head on over to thedadedge.com/bark to claim it. Also upon checkout, use Good Dad, all one word, upon checkout. That's 10% off for life for protecting your kids' digital world and preserving their inner voice, like we're talking about today. Like I said, go to thedadedge.com/bark for all the information to go check out the phone, the watch, and their plans. If you've already got them a phone, you can just download the app right to their current phone, which is awesome. I'll tell you what, you wouldn't let your kid probably ride a bike or a skateboard without a helmet. Well, if they have a device, this is your helmet. This is your protection. It's awesome. I've been using it for 6 years. You cannot go wrong with it. All right, gents, back to the show.
No. Well, so look, again, I just want to make the distinction. For some kids, that is the thing to do, but you've got to know your kid. If you've got a highly sensitive kid, and you know, and they say, you know, let's just say, I don't know, they had perfect grades, and this is the first time they failed a test or something like that, and then they come to this conclusion, and they say, hey, what happened? And they said, you know, I got an F on the test, and you say, okay, but I mean, you know, there's many times that you haven't gotten an F on a test. So like, what happened that you now think that you're dumb? And they say, well, I'm never going to amount to anything. I say, wait a second. Okay, like you got an F on a test, and now what you're telling me is that you're dumb. But it's not like you've told me every single time you got an A that you're a genius. You know, it's you got an F on a test. So what is more effective? Is it more effective to say that you're dumb, or is it more effective to say, hey, what happened? What happened in this context, like that you got an F on a test? Because you're getting an F on a test and concluding that you're dumb isn't actually all that helpful to you. You know, we don't have a treatment for dumb, by the way, but we have a treatment for we have a treatment for like, hey, I didn't understand the material. Hey, there's a bump up in level of difficulty. I went from regular to AP, and so, you know, what is the help that we need in order to, you know, get you more help with this? And that would be true of a sport. You know, like a kid moves up from one level of sport to another level of sport, and then, you know, maybe it's soccer or football, baseball, and, you know, the pitching's faster, the balls are thrown harder, whatever it is. And like, okay, how do we build that up? But it's sort of thinking like, what ended up happening that, you know, you've done pretty well up until now, and that this was such a difficult test? Was it because you studied the wrong material? Was it that you didn't study? Was it you were sick the night before, that you didn't study whatsoever, that is just more complicated? There's a bump up. And that way you can actually solve for the problem, because you cannot solve for dumb. That's just a conclusion that you're coming to. And it's sort of like, okay, I can see how you've gotten A's or A's and B's, and now you've got an F. You came to the conclusion that you were dumb. You didn't come to the conclusion the material was too hard. I need more help with this kind of material, which is the correct conclusion to come up with. But saying you're not dumb skips an entire process where the person's able to sort of reflect on what actually happened.
That makes sense to me. It's really just having the conversation and maybe guiding the kid not to necessarily go to extremes in their thinking, and maybe just to dissect the situation and maybe unpack it for really what it is, correct? And that's what you're talking about, is just raising a critical thinker. They just need a little bit of guidance, correct?
Exactly. And I worry you know, at a time when it just seems to me that children have many more facts in many situations. You know, certainly their ability to do certain things better than I could when I was young. But I don't know that critical thinking has improved. And one of the ways to get to critical thinking is to, you know, in the old days of math tests, they say, well, show me the steps. How did you get from there to there? And it's the same sort of thing as show me the critical thinking along the way of how you got there. But that's at a cognitive level. But what you're doing at an emotional level is that you're saying, I'm listening to what you have to say. You don't even have to say, I'm listening to what you have to say. You just being there the emotional support that your child needs for that. And even if it's obvious to you, maybe you say, "Oh, I'm an average sensitive person. Um, I'm not as emotional as my kid is." And you might even think like, "Wow, okay, like that's blowing it up." You staying regulated and you staying critical in your thinking with the kid who is more sensitive is telling the child at a functional level that they've got this, that they've got the skill set to be able to do it. You just need to slow things down. If you, on the other hand, like ramp things up and say, come on, like you need to try harder and push harder and everything, that's just going to spike their emotional reaction. And it's just so much harder to solve problems when you're emotionally out of control.
So this kind of conversation, it not only teaches maybe how to dissect a situation for what it is, be maybe a critical thinker, but also emotional regulation.
100%. So it does it. But that's because in the same way, I mean, if you look at the confrontation between two people, and one starts to escalate, and the other one starts to escalate, and the other one starts to escalate. So there's co-dysregulation. In the same way, you can co-regulate. You bringing your emotional bringing your emotions to a kind of a calmer level will often send a message to the other person's brain that they can also calm down. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. Okay, got it. What about when kids are like the influence doesn't necessarily come from them 100%. So it doesn't necessarily come from their inner voice. Let's just say they're being bullied. And that bully voice kind of turns into their voice. So it's almost like that inner voice of maybe self-hatred or criticism is almost reinforced by other people that just want to push you around.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that I get the young people that I work with to tell me is I ask them who their teachers of self-hatred were. It's possible that it was a parent. It's possible that it was a teacher. It's possible that they were the bullies. Now, if I ask someone who are the people you admire in your life, who are the people you look up to, who are the people you respect, maybe it's grandma, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's a teacher, who knows, maybe it's a coach, whoever that is. So do you want to be like those people? And they'll say yes. They'll say, are they your bullies? Are they the ones that bullied you? And they'll say, no. I'm saying, do more of what they are doing, because if you're doing more of what the bullies are doing, it's just going to teach you that what they said was actually true about you. You're going to say, I am, those bully voices are true about me. And you're going to internalize them, and you're going to say, that is who I am. Now, it's very difficult with a child who's being bullied at school. And that's where I think, having voices that are protective of that child then creates a kind of a different version of that child's sense of self. So say you've got bullies, but then you come home and your parents are saying, like you got to toughen up. You're just like weak, go and give it back to them. Effectively, even though you as a parent may be wanting to support your kid, in fact, you're bullying your child because you're telling them to do something that they cannot do. They don't have the skill set to be able to do it because they're young people. And so you're not modeling that kind of behavior. And there are times when we do have to intervene as parents. We do have to go, ideally if the kid can address it on their own at school, that's great. Sometimes we do have to intervene with the school, depending on the level of bullying. We've had kids who are on the autism spectrum who don't exactly know how to protect themselves and defend themselves, and we've had to somehow intervene. But later on in adolescence, it's sort of like these bullies got into your head. They live there rent free right now, and they taught you something about yourself that wasn't true. But if you continue to buy their narrative, their teachings, you're going to continue to believe that you're a flawed individual when you aren't. So listen to the teachers that you admire, not the ones that you disrespect.
Can we back up a little bit about the belief of criticism?
Mm-hmm.
I know we're talking about things that are, I guess, more advanced in when this, this belief sort of sets in and why we're critical of ourselves. But let me ask you this just from a psychological standpoint. Why is it easier for a human being to believe in criticism and negativity versus the good things that we bring to the table or the positive aspects about us?
Mm-hmm. Do you know the National Science Foundation said that a human being has about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. The vast majority of them are negative. Now, why would that be? Because from an evolutionary perspective, in order to survive, we had to see threats everywhere. Without, you wouldn't want to see the saber-toothed tiger and say, "Oh, nice little kitty, why don't you come here and play?" You get eaten alive, or you see a neighboring clan that is coming towards your land, and you sort of think, "Oh, let's invite them over for tea," So you had to see threat. That people who experience threat and kind of almost paranoid thinking were the ones who were more likely to survive. So our brain, from an evolutionary perspective, is primed for a certain degree of negativity. Now, in the modern world, we can let most of those thoughts go. But for the highly sensitive child, strong emotions are like super glue to labels. And when you've got a lot of negativity that's already going on in your mind, and then somebody says something negative about you, it begins to resonate with what's already floating around. So when you say you're this wonderful human being, because you've already not believed that to be true, that's less likely to stick than that negative label. Now, if on the other hand, and by the way, we've seen it the other way too, is that, we see kids who are just so praised. It doesn't matter what they do. It's like, you ate a chicken wing and it's like, wow, you're the most wonderful human being ever. And I think that that's also pretty toxic because that's also not reality as it is. I mean, you can see it going both ways. But the child who is constantly praised, even if it's excessive, is less likely to engage in self-destructive behaviors. So, the ones that I'm kind of more interested is in the ones who where that strong emotionality has allowed these negative labels to stick. So it can go both ways, not just the one way. I just don't tend to see the ones where it's all been positive and those positive labels have stuck. I mean, there's a certain degree of narcissism that can come in like, wow, I'm just the most fabulous person ever. I'm the best soccer player. I'm the best, politician, whatever it is.
Got it. Okay. So, we're primed for basically negativity to keep us alive. That's what you're saying. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we can take that too far, especially in the modern age, is what you're saying. And then psychologically, if this is not caught, this could kind of turn into more of a self-fulfilling prophecy and negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative life, that kind of thing. What is the balance then for parents between praise, criticism, and discipline?
Yeah. So I tended to use praise very, very sparingly. So praise, I mean, generally it would be under novel situations. So say the first time the kid ties their shoelace, or the first time the kid, I don't know, rides their bicycle or something like that. If you think about, your kid rides their bicycle, every single time you're praising them after that, well, then the value of praise is going to be less and less valuable. So whenever something was done for the first time, maybe the second time, perhaps the third time. Now, the other thing is that you have to know that praise is the thing that's reinforcing. In what that means is that some kids get annoyed by praise. It's like, yeah, obviously I can do this. Like, don't need to go on and on for this. So that's in terms of praise. For me, I think the first once, twice, maybe three times a kid does something new, if they like praise, I will praise them. Um, so you said the three things between praise, discipline, and what was the
Praise, discipline, and I would even say, let me retract the question a little bit. So praise, discipline, but I would also say a balancing conversations around
mhm,
negative self-talk.
mhm. Yeah. So okay. So now in terms of discipline, what we know in terms of discipline is that there's a difference between punishment and effective discipline. So punishment tends to be arbitrary, like, I'm taking your cell phone away for a month, and it's not tied to anything. It's just sort of an anger response to a behavior that you don't like. It doesn't tend to do much learning, but there are consequences. So, for instance, when my 16-year-old, who wasn't allowed to drive um, other kids in the car when he had his learner's permit, and I caught him driving other kids around, I said, okay, well, the car's gone for 2 weeks. And that had consequence because it also had consequence to me because I had to take him to school then and stuff like that. But it was, it was sort of embarrassing for him and those sorts of things. So I think that when you're setting limits and when you're setting discipline, it has to be not from a point of view of emotionality. And it cannot be like, I'm taking the car away for the rest of your life, because A, no one is ever going to do that, and B, the child just learns that you're making a lot of noise. So you have to make sure that the consequence fits the crime, to the extent that it is, and you've got to stick to it. And you also want to have a lot of grace. So if you see that the kid is really working hard, so you say, look, no car for the next 2 weeks, but then you see the kid really doing a lot of hard work and really stepping up to everything else that they need to do, you might say, hey, look, I recognize how hard you've been working. I'm going to take 2 days off those 2 weeks. So it's really tying those two things together. But taking away his phone for driving the car would make no sense. I want to tie the consequence to that in terms of the discipline. Now, in terms of the balance, I think that if a kid says, I didn't try hard enough, or, I didn't do well on that test, I'm so stupid, and you just hear that once or something like that, or like I dated the wrong guy, that was stupid. If you hear that kind of talk once every now and then, okay, let that be. If you hear that on a persistent basis, I think that then at that point you really have to step in and listen in the way that we described earlier on.
Let me ask a question that I think just a lot of parents kind of get into bad habits. I'm going to throw myself on the sword on this one because it's a bad habit, and it's a habit I've done for as long as I can remember, and probably every time I do it and I catch myself doing it, I'm like, holy crap, man, like, what are you doing? Like, why would you speak to your kid like this? So and this is a knee-jerk reaction. I don't do it with my bigger kids just because I don't speak to them this way, but they're also not necessarily doing the shenanigans that my 9-year-old is doing. But like, here's what I'll do. And I caught myself doing this quite some time ago, and I'm really trying not to say it because it's a knee-jerk reaction. So he might be doing something. I'd be like, dude, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing that? Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh my God, like what if like that just rolls off my tongue like it's nothing. But for him, for a 9-year-old to be like, what's wrong with you? Like, I kind of step back from that and be like, wait a second. No. I cannot speak to him like that. You know what I mean? So like I think that when a parent, and I'll use my example because I started in this sometimes, a lot of time, but like I do suck at this sometimes, and I think I just sort of get into my own way of doing things, and I don't think what I'm saying is that big of a big deal. And in fact, usually it's like the first thing that you say, it's so reactionary, you're not even thinking of it, and you just say it. And I sit there and I think about like, this kid for years has been hearing, what is wrong with you? Like, that's not
Exactly.
like, so I'm
No.
probably like giving that inner critic like way more juice, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, you're exact. First of all, I mean, one of the interesting things is like when you say I have a tendency or I have a habit, the minute that you recognize that, it's a choice. So that because it's no longer a tendency or a habit. Like habit is mindless. So it's and one thing is that so think about this. It's like so if you went up to your kid and say, "What's wrong with you?" It automatically says there is something wrong with you that I haven't figured out. And by the way, I mean, what is wrong with you is also a reflection of who I am. And so, but if you were to say, look, I mean, if you think about this, for almost every single one of us, the reason we do anything makes sense to us from our point of view. And so there's your kid, and I don't know what he's doing. He's throwing the tennis ball against the window or something like that. And what is wrong with you? And rather than saying that, it's like, dude, like, what's going on? Like, tell me what's going on. Like probably in the child's mind is that's a lot of fun. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't one or two kids that that aren't going to do something with intention, but the vast majority of kids, when you actually question them, it is fun. And I remember I would do all kinds of crazy stuff when I was 9, 10 years old. I remember digging a tunnel between my house and my neighbor's house. I thought it was like, yeah. So we grew up in South Africa, and so I had read this escape story from World War II where these prisoners dig a tunnel underneath, and my dad was walking around. He fell in the tunnel. I was like, "What's wrong with you guys?" It was really funny, but I thought it was like brilliant. I thought it was like the most incredible thing, and my neighbors would get onto the other side and come to visit us. And we just thought it was the most brilliant thing. But like from my dad's point of view, we'd wreck the lawn, and just that it was not hardly the lawn, but it was just on that side, But I was just doing what I thought was fun. But from his point of view, it was just so often when a kid is just doing what they're doing, it's fun, it's sort of like the thing that they're doing. And they're not thinking wow, if my dad had said, "What's wrong with you?" which he did, then I'd think like, wait, maybe there is something like flawed about who I am that go around digging tunnels, But so it now here's the one thing though, Larry, that I think is really, really important and that every single parent can do. If you think about it, it's interesting. The research shows this, that between parents who get it right and parents who get it wrong, the vast majority of us get it wrong 70% of the time. Whether we get it right or we get it wrong. But here's the thing is the parents who do effective parenting go back to their kid and they say, you know what? When we were talking yesterday, I said to you, "What's wrong with you?" And I just want to apologize for that. That wasn't right. I was just like, like I was annoyed by whatever you were doing. And I didn't handle that very well. But I'm just like curious about why it is, what happens that you do that thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, and let them talk to you about that. So you can always go back, but you don't want to leave them with the message, "What's wrong with you?"
You know what's so cool about what you brought? Thank you for the lesson, by the way. I think I'm going to have that conversation tonight.
There you go.
So the cool thing about doing this podcast, one of the cool things of many, is I get to see snippets of really fantastic parenting live and right away. And I also get to be I've done, we've done over 1,300 episodes. So like you really kind of get to be in that position. And what I just did when you did that is I put myself in the position of like, if I was your kid, how would I feel being spoken to like that? And there was such tremendous safety, relatability. It made me want to talk to you. Even the tonality of your voice was so welcoming and non-judgmental. And it's just like, if I was your son and you spoke to me like that, I would want to talk to you more. It would automatically make you more relatable, and I'd want a better relationship with you and a better conversation with you.
Well, and actually, I went with my son. We went out into the in Nevada desert to go rappelling and like rock climbing and all sorts of stuff like that. And we were talking about childhood, and he just said, like I always felt I could talk to you. That was the one thing. Now, they will also tell you that I yelled at them. And that's like, I mean, you don't have to be a child psychiatrist to be a good dad. And like, there are often many times when I didn't exhibit this kind of behavior, but the difference was I would always go back. I would like get into a more regulated state, meaning like in a calmer state, so that I could have that discussion because I don't want my kids to leave with that message that I'm disappointed, that I'm critical, and they know I was pissed as all heck when my son was driving the car around with some other kid in there, and he knew it. But it was like, dude, come on, let's sit down, let's talk. What is going on? And he said, you know what, Dad, I'm the first kid in my class to get the learner's permit. You know how cool it is to be driving around and be the big man on campus? And I said, okay, I get it, and you still can't drive the car, But I wanted to have that discussion, not like you are, you're an f up, like you're a messed up kid, because that's also, by the way, a reflection of who I am. It's sort of like, I've also taught him some stuff, and maybe I don't want to hear that self-critical voice that I'm a bad parent. It's easier to deflect that onto the other. So it's just like saying, you know what, I reacted in a certain way. It wasn't my best moment. It's okay. It's going back. And I think that parents sometimes think that if they go back, that they're backing down. But backing down from what? From having a kid who can talk to you in future life? It doesn't matter. You're teaching your child that it's okay and that adults make mistakes. Because if you don't make mistake, wait until you have a teacher who's a bully. We have a coach who's a bully, and they're saying the message is that adults don't make mistake. It's a wrong message.
I think that's how you and I were raised, though. I don't want to speak for you, but that's how a lot of people in my generation were.
Absolutely. I had a hardcore Catholic dad who just was spare the rod and spoil the child. But I did have a mom who was pure compassion, and she would listen to me. I don't know that she necessarily, I just remembered like I was able to just like talk to her about stuff. I don't necessarily remember much about what she said. I just remember feeling safe in that environment that, and I think that that's the key part. So yes, I was raised in it, but I also remember a lot of kids who were raised in that environment and kind of a Catholic boys' school who, corporal punishment was still, what was used. And a lot of them came out pretty scarred.
I mean, you and I were raised probably I don't know how old you are. I'll be 50 here in a couple months, but I was
61 in May.
Dude, you don't look 61, but I'm gonna tell you, like I went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic all boys high school, and yeah, like you got hit sometimes. Like it was not uncommon to be hit. Like when you're and you're just like, oh yeah, I must have really messed up. I got hit. I got spanked or I got slapped upside the head or something. I remember being in 5th grade. And a priest put me in a headlock and ordered me back to the sacristy because I went in the wrong room to get candles, and he was pissed. But
exactly.
So I think we're obviously we're raising kids in a different environment than what we did, and I think we're a bit more human. But going back to, you said something here that I really want to double down on, and I really want you to talk about. I don't, and this is kind of what you said. I don't remember exactly what my mom said, but I remember how I felt around her. I felt safe. I've heard that quote from many, many people that, kids can't necessarily articulate everything about their childhood, but they can tell you how they felt. And so I'm really curious, I think every guy listening to this podcast wants to have a kid who feels safe, right? There's absolutely an atmosphere and an environment of discipline and structure, right? But there's also an environment of peace, compassion, and safety, and you do have an adult to talk to. And I think a lot of us who were raised in an environment where we didn't have that, we're kind of scratching our head of like, okay, I didn't really have that, but how do I provide that? And I would love for you to share just an insight you have there.
I remember my the town I grew up with here in Massachusetts, they'd never won the state championship in soccer. And my son, who went on to become captains the only year they won the state soccer championship. And I remember when watching the dads of other kids, and I don't know, they were like 8 years old, and the kid didn't score a goal or didn't pass the ball. And the dads would come down and just like beat the emotional living daylights out of that kid, as if that single goal was the decision to invade Greenland or not. It was like World War III. It was like going to be, and it's sort of like, what the hell? And I mean, my son, he got so excited about going and playing soccer all the time. Yeah. And, like if he was like, like, I don't know, walking around, I'd say, come on, go chase the ball, whatever it is. But it was never about, like, no single moment was going to be the one that was going to make him, Ronaldo. But one single moment could be the one that destroyed his love of the game because of the response of a dad. And it's just like, how many times, and you sort of see these like, dads at hockey, or, these kids are like 8 or 9, they're having fun. They're like trying to get better at it, but they're just like having these massive reactions. How can a child feel safe when the one person who is there, who's supposed to be on their side, who's supposed to help them feel calm, but he, isn't doing that? But the other part of it is this, and that is that when you are the parent that's instilling fear into your child, not only do you not feel safe, but the brain that is afraid cannot learn and cannot perform. Imagine that you are, I don't know, you make it to the Olympics or anything, and you're just terrified. You're not going to be able to perform. Maybe you're, doing a race. Maybe you're in martial arts or whatever, but you're afraid you're not going to be able to perform. So that many times, parents will think, okay, like out of fear, I'm going to get my kid to do something. No, you're teaching them to be afraid. You're making them experts at being afraid. And so it's like, what does your reaction is about you. It's not about your kid. And you have to answer that question. Your child does not. Your 9-year-old child does not have to answer the question, Dad, why are you so psychologically broken up about this thing? That's about you. It's not about them. And if you go around living, expecting other people to live up to your standards, you're going to be eternally miserable. And not only that, it's not going to teach your kid what to do. There's going to be no autonomy and no agency, because inside their head is going to be, what does my father want me to do? What does my mom want me to do? And is that always in my best interest? And it might not be.
Yeah. So a kid that feels safe is a kid who will probably behave better, correct? Is that safe?
It's interesting, because here's the thing is, I think in the long run, yes. So I see now the young people that my kids have grown up to be, and the behaviors that they do and the way that they engage with me. And listen, kids have to challenge authority in order to grow up to a certain extent, but they're not going to, by behaving better, I'm just saying, like, they're not going to get into more criminal activity. They're not going to be, dealing drugs. They're just much less likely to be doing those things, because they're going to have more respect for themselves. And as a consequence of that, more respect for the people around them. And they're less likely to be the perpetrators of cruel and mean behavior. So yeah, I would say yes.
One more question before we wrap this up. Do you have a couple minutes?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Mm-hmm. What about the parents that just allow the kid to do whatever they want? Like, I'm sitting here thinking, like we all know those parents that the kid is an absolute hellion, and you're like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. No, we should be doing that. I'm gonna take something away, and then they never do anything about it, and the kid is just a hellion.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually find that to be just as toxic, if not more, than the other kind of parenting, because it's completely divorced from reality. reality is not that way. It leads to a degree of entitlement, a degree of lack of responsibility, and I think it's very, very dangerous parenting, and I don't know how a person can develop an inner core of self-confidence, self-assuredness if there's either zero boundary or excessive boundaries. And I just think like there is behavior that is just unacceptable in our day in society, and it's and calling out. Now, the way that you address it, saying you are a bad human being is very different from, that's unacceptable. But the other thing is you also have to think about what has happened that has allowed that boundarylessness to come into play. That's not about the child. You as a parent have to take responsibility for that. And whoever taught you that a child should be able to do whatever it is that they want gave you very bad lessons in parenting. Very, very ineffective. And actually, what I've seen is those kids end up being quite weak. And the reason is because they finally get to a stage where they have to be on their own. They face a challenge for the first time. Life pushes back, and they don't know what to do. They've got no grit and no resilience. And that's also because of ineffective parenting.
I think about this quote that I heard Dr. Daniel Amen say, that every time you literally do something for your child that they can cognitively or physically do, you're stealing a little bit of their confidence down the road.
Absolutely. I think that's right. And I would do, I often would, when I thought my kids could do something and then they hadn't, and they'd say, oh, I forgot this at school or this at home. If it wasn't critical, I'd say, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to solve this problem? Now, of course, I'm always going to be by their side. And if I can help them out, I'm going to help them out. But I want to see, and this is where the critical thinking piece comes in, I want to see what they can do on their own before I jump in. In the short run, it takes more effort. In the long run, it builds resilient, confident, competent kids.
That's what I'm talking about. I love that. This has been really fantastic. So just if we were to wrap this into a bow for parents, you really have to have a balance, right, of compassion to create an environment of psychological safety, but also be willing to take the time to have conversations to build resilience and problem solving and critical thinking and emotional regulation and all those different things, correct?
Well, that's absolutely correct. And it's not compassionate not to set limits. And I think that sometimes parents don't want to get into it because it's uncomfortable having some of these discussions. But actually, the kind thing is to actually do the very thing that is going to be important for you and important for the kid. And in the long run, important for the relationship that you have together.
I got to tell you, this has been really, really enlightening. And I also love the simplicity that you put around this too. It's you've put this in a very black and white way, which I love, which when we make things way too complicated or too dynamic, it's just like, man, like I just don't know what to do. But I love this balance of, like we were talking about, safety, compassion, structure, discipline, emotional regulation, critical thinking, all these different things that I think truly help us. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for thinking about the book and expanding the thoughts about it to the ways in which it could impact sort of everyday life. And thank you for the service that you give to parents who want less complicated answers. So.
Well, thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
Gentlemen, I say this a lot, but this one was definitely worth listening to twice, in my opinion. Dr. Blaise, man, he really gave us just a masterclass on parenting with presence, raising critical thinkers, and becoming the emotional anchor that our kids need, especially in a world that wants to pull them in every different direction. That's why in the middle of the show, I talked about Bark. If this episode really hits you home and you're tired of going at fatherhood or business alone, it's time to plug into a community where this kind of growth, it's the norm. It's the everyday conversation. That's why in the Dad Edge Alliance, this is for our career-driven men who want to elevate their marriage and lead families with strength. I also got the Dad Edge Boardroom for all you business owners out there who want to continue to build the business that you love without losing the connection to your wife and your kids that matter most. The bottom line is this: we don't have to do this alone. We were actually never meant to do this alone. And if you guys head on over to thedadedge.com/1357, you're going to find resources from Dr. Blaise. You're going to find our links in there for the Alliance, for the Boardroom, and also for Bark. So again, go to thedadedge.com/1357. Stop drifting, start leading, and I'll see you over there. Take care.